My name is Claire Dawson. I'm 36 years old, and the moment my younger sister stood up at Christmas, dinner with a champagne flute in her hand, I knew I was about to become the evening's favorite joke. Emily had always loved an audience. She smiled brightly as she looked around the table, waiting until every conversation had faded. "Can we all take a second?" she said, raising her glass. "To appreciate Claire for proving that you really can survive your 30s without a husband. Kids or anyone waiting for you at home?" Laughter rolled through the dining room. Some people laughed politely. Others laughed because Emily always expected them to. My mother laughed the loudest. "Oh, Emily," she said between chuckles, "leave your sister alone." But she was still smiling. My father lowered his eyes to his plate. He never laughed during moments like these. He simply never stopped them. Emily looked at me with the same expression she'd worn since we were teenagers. Sweet enough for strangers, cruel enough for family. "So," she continued, swirling her wine, "what's your plan? Another year pretending work is your soulmate?" A cousin across the table snorted. Someone muttered, "She's married to spreadsheets." Another added, "At least they don't argue." More laughter. I calmly folded my napkin and placed it beside my plate. "I'll be fine," I said. Emily grinned. "I know you'll survive. I'm just wondering if you'll ever actually live." Silence settled over me. Not because I was embarrassed, because something inside me finally became tired. For years I had answered with another joke. For years I had protected everyone else's comfort. For years I let them believe they knew my life. This Christmas, I decided they didn't deserve that privilege anymore. I looked directly at my mother, then at Emily, then around the room. "I haven't been single for a long time." The room went completely still. Emily blinked. "What?" "I'm married." Nobody spoke. It felt as though even the Christmas music had stopped. My mother frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I got married almost 2 years ago." My father's fork slipped from his hand onto the china plate. Emily laughed nervously. "No, seriously. I am serious." My uncle looked genuinely confused. "You got married?" I nodded. 22 months ago." My mother's face turned pale. "Why would you keep something like that from your own family?" I smiled sadly. "Because every important part of my life eventually became entertainment." Emily scoffed. "Oh, please." "I'm serious," I continued. "When I was promoted, you told everyone I only got the job because my boss felt sorry for me. When my last relationship ended, you somehow knew before I told anyone. When I bought my condo, Mom invited 30 relatives to see it before I had even unpacked." Mom opened her mouth. "I was proud of you. You invited them without asking. I didn't think—" "I know." Emily crossed her arms. "So who's the mystery husband?" There it was. Not, "Are you happy?" Not, "Why didn't you trust us?" Just curiosity, information, something new to own. I glanced toward the thick leather folder resting beside my mother's chair. The folder everyone had been talking about all evening. Inside was the proposal. The Dawson development had spent the last 7 months preparing. According to Emily, one signature would save the company. One investor, one meeting, one chance. She had mentioned his name at least 15 times during dinner. "If we land this partnership," she'd announced proudly earlier that evening, "our company will finally be back where Grandpa always wanted it." Everyone applauded. No one noticed I never joined in. I looked back at Emily. "You already know my husband's name." She frowned. "What?" "You've spent half the year trying to schedule meetings with him." Nobody moved. My father's eyes drifted toward the folder. My mother slowly turned to look at it as well. Emily's confident smile disappeared. "No." I nodded. "My husband is Ethan Brooks." The room exploded into whispers. Impossible. It couldn't be. Everyone in our city knew Ethan Brooks, not because he chased publicity, because he almost never appeared in it. He had built Brooks Urban, restoration into one of the country's most respected redevelopment firms, specializing in restoring abandoned civic landmarks instead of demolishing them. Universities, libraries, historic train stations, old courthouses, entire downtown districts. Developers wanted fast profits. Ethan built reputations by saving history, and for nearly 7 months, my family had been trying desperately to convince Brooks Urban Restoration to become the lead investor in their largest project. Emily stared at me. "No." "Yes." "You're lying." Without saying another word, I unlocked my phone. I opened a photograph, not one from social media. There weren't any. A simple picture, Ethan and I standing beneath stained glass windows inside a restored 19th century library. No luxury wedding, no celebrity guests, just 12 people, 2 rings, and smiles that had never needed anyone else's approval. I placed the phone in the center of the table. Nobody reached for it. My father finally whispered, "My God." Mom leaned closer. Her hands actually trembled. Emily didn't even look at the photo for more than a second. Instead, her eyes dropped to the proposal folder. "Does Ethan know about the Riverside project?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because she had just proven exactly why I'd kept my marriage secret. "Yes," I answered quietly. "He knows everything." Emily straightened. "So, you've been discussing confidential family business with him?" "No, I've discussed my work with my husband." "That's different." "It is." "Then how does he know about our proposal?" I rested one hand on the leather folder. "Because your proposal contains something that belongs to me." Confused looks spread around the table. "What are you talking about?" Dad asked. I slowly opened the folder. Halfway through, I found the page I'd memorized weeks earlier. Then I turned it around so everyone could see it. "This acoustic redevelopment study." I tapped the page. "I wrote it?" Emily immediately answered. "You helped us." "No. You sent Dad your notes." "I sent him a confidential report for educational purposes." Mom frowned. "What's the difference?" "The difference," I looked directly into Emily's eyes, "is that this report was never yours to submit." She laughed nervously. "Oh, Claire." Then I flipped another page. And another. Each one made the room quieter. My engineering analysis, my structural recommendations, my copyrighted diagrams, my professional certification number, everything, except one detail, the signature. At the bottom of the final page, someone had signed my name. I never had. I placed my finger beneath it. "I didn't authorize this." Nobody breathed. Dad slowly picked up the proposal. His hands began shaking. "Emily?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Because for the first time in her life, the entire family wasn't looking at me. They were looking at her. Nobody said a word. The only sound in the dining room was the faint crackling of the fireplace. My father looked from the forged signature to Emily, then back again. "You tell me this isn't what I think it is." Emily folded her arms. "It isn't." "Then explain it." "It was a draft." I almost smiled. A draft isn't submitted to an investment committee. It wasn't finalized. It was delivered. Dad turned another page. The signature appeared again. Then again. My credentials had been listed as lead acoustic consultant for Dawson Development. My professional license number, my consulting firm, even my email address. Everything was accurate, except one detail. I had never agreed to work on the project. Dad looked up slowly. "When did Claire join the company?" Emily answered before anyone else could. "She was going to." I stared at her. "I was?" "You've always helped us." "Helping isn't employment." Mom finally stepped in. "Girls." "No," I interrupted quietly. "Let's stop pretending this is another misunderstanding." I pulled a folded document from my handbag. I printed something before coming tonight. I unfolded it across the table. "This is the original report." Then I placed another copy beside it. "And this is your proposal." Even people who knew nothing about engineering could see it. Entire paragraphs matched. Charts, illustrations, recommendations, word for word. Only my company logo had disappeared. Emily rolled her eyes. "You act like we stole a novel." "No, I act like someone stole intellectual property." Mom sighed dramatically. "Claire, don't. You know how stressful these past months have been." "I do. The company is barely surviving." "I know. We were desperate." "And desperation gives you permission to forge my signature?" Nobody answered. Across the table, my aunt quietly pushed her plate away. Dinner had officially ended. Dad continued reading. His face became paler with every page. Finally, he stopped. "Emily," his voice was barely above a whisper. "Did you remove Claire's copyright notice?" Emily hesitated. Marketing cleaned up the formatting. "So that's a yes." It looked more professional. I leaned back. "There it is." "What?" "The sentence." "What sentence?" It looked more professional. I looked around the room. "That sentence has followed me my entire life." "When I won a university research award," Emily interrupted. "That has nothing to do with this." "It has everything to do with this." I continued anyway. The press release listed, "Emily is the family's rising design star because my work sounded too technical." Mom immediately protested. "We wanted something people understood." "No, you wanted something people admired." Silence. "When I designed the Riverside Children's Theater," I continued, "my vibration system won a regional innovation prize." Emily looked away. Dad closed his eyes. "You entered those drawings under Dawson Development's portfolio." Emily answered immediately. "It was publicity. It was plagiarism. It benefited the family. It benefited you." Mom rubbed her temples. "We settled that years ago." "No, you asked me not to report it." Dad slowly lowered his head. He remembered, because he had been the one who begged me. "Please don't embarrass the company." I had listened. I always listened. Until now. Emily suddenly slammed one hand against the table. "Oh my God, Claire." "What? Do you hear yourself?" "I'm quoting facts. You're trying to destroy everything Dad built." I looked directly at her. "No, I'm refusing to keep rebuilding what you keep breaking." The room fell silent again. Mom suddenly looked at me. "Does Ethan know about all this?" I answered honestly. "Yes." Emily laughed bitterly. "So you've been feeding him information?" "No. He learned about your proposal because his legal department contacted me." Dad frowned. "Legal?" I nodded. "They wanted to verify why Brooks Urban Restoration had received documents claiming I had joined Dawson Development." Mom's expression changed. "What?" "They thought perhaps I had accepted a second position without informing them." Emily's confidence finally cracked. "What exactly did they ask?" "They asked whether I'd authorized the submission." "And?" I said no. Nobody moved. "They asked whether the signature was genuine." "And?" I said no. "They asked whether the engineering studies belonged to Dawson Development." "And?" I sent them my copyright registration. Emily's breathing became noticeably faster. "No. They now know every technical document. Inside your proposal belongs to my consulting firm." Dad slowly placed both hands on the table. "When did this happen?" 3 weeks ago. "You knew?" "I wanted to hear the truth from my own family first." Mom whispered, "You should have told us." I looked at her. "I've been trying to tell you the truth for 15 years. She had no answer. My phone vibrated. I didn't need to look. It was Ethan. He knew tonight mattered. I answered. "You okay?" "I'm fine. You sound tired." "I am." "They know." A short silence. "And the documents?" "They know about those too. Would you like me to come?" Before I could answer, Mom reached toward me. "Claire?" She forced a warm smile. "May I speak with Ethan?" I looked at the phone, then at Ethan's name on the screen. "You can." I switched to speaker. "Good evening, Mrs. Dawson," Ethan said politely. His calm voice somehow made the room even quieter. Mom immediately shifted into the polished tone she reserved for clients. "Ethan, I'm afraid you've become involved in a family misunderstanding." "I don't believe I have. It was simply an internal draft. Our compliance department reviewed the submission." "Vanessa." "Emily," Mom corrected automatically. "My apologies. Our department reviewed Dawson Development's submission before I learned Claire was connected to your family." Mom hesitated. "So, this has nothing to do with your marriage?" "It has everything to do with my wife." He paused. "But nothing to do with favoritism." Everyone looked at the phone. "If Claire were a stranger," Ethan continued, "my response would be exactly the same." Dad slowly closed the proposal. "What response?" "Our investment committee has already voted." Emily froze. "What?" "The partnership will not move forward." The words hit the room like broken glass. Mom actually stumbled backward. "No, we cannot invest in a company whose submission contains forged authorization, unauthorized intellectual property, and inaccurate professional representation." Emily finally exploded. "This is because she's your wife." "No," Ethan answered immediately. "It's because the evidence exists." Then he added calmly, "My marriage simply prevented your company from claiming she approved something she never saw." Nobody spoke. Finally, Ethan said quietly, "Claire." "Yes?" "You don't have to solve this." I closed my eyes for a second. For most of my life, whenever my family created chaos, someone expected me to fix it. Ethan had never once expected that. "I know," I whispered. We'll talk when you get home. I love you. I love you too. I ended the call. The silence afterward felt heavier than any argument. Then Dad slowly turned toward Emily. For the first time, not as his favorite daughter, but as the executive who now had one question left to answer. Tell me the truth. Did you forge your sister's signature? Or did someone do it because you told them to? Emily didn't answer. She looked at our mother instead. Just as she always had, waiting for someone else to rescue her. Mom stepped forward immediately. Richard, this isn't helping. Dad never looked away from Emily. I asked a question. It doesn't matter who uploaded the file, Mom insisted. We're talking about paperwork. No, Dad replied quietly. We're talking about trust. Emily let out a frustrated sigh. I signed it. The words landed with surprising calm. No tears, no apology, nothing. Dad blinked. What? I signed Claire's name. Nobody moved. But, she added quickly, I knew she would have supported the project eventually. I almost laughed. Eventually. Such a convenient word. You don't get to volunteer my reputation for a deadline. You weren't answering your phone. So you became me? We were desperate. You keep saying that. Because it's true. Her voice rose. You have no idea what it's been like trying to save this company. I stared at her. I know exactly what it's been like. She frowned. No, you don't. For years, every time something went wrong, Dad called me. I looked at my father. You remember? He slowly nodded. When the Jefferson Theater ceiling failed, I spent 3 weekends redesigning the reinforcement plan. When City Hall rejected your permit, I rewrote the acoustic compliance report. When your biggest client threatened to leave, I introduced you to 2 preservation consultants. I looked back at Emily. I never charged you. She crossed her arms. Because we're family. No, because I believed helping family meant something. Dad whispered. Oh, Claire. But every favor became permission. I pointed toward the proposal. You stopped asking. You started assuming. Mom interrupted. We always appreciated everything you've done. I smiled sadly. No. You appreciated that I rarely said no. That sentence hit harder than I expected. Because even Mom couldn't deny it. Every memory suddenly felt connected. Every late-night phone call. Every emergency. Every promise that next time would be different. There had never been a next time. Only another favor. Another crisis. Another expectation. Dad slowly removed his glasses. When did we become people you couldn't trust? I answered honestly. I don't know the exact day. I know the moment. Everyone looked at me. It was 4 years ago. The Heritage Theater Awards? Dad asked quietly. I nodded. Emily's shoulders stiffened. She knew exactly what I meant. The Heritage Theater had been my biggest professional achievement. The building sat beneath elevated train tracks. Every passing freight train had shaken the auditorium. Most engineers believed the structure couldn't be saved. I spent 8 months designing a floating interior, shell that isolated vibration without destroying the original architecture. The project won a statewide preservation award, or it should have. Instead, I arrived at the ceremony and discovered Dawson Development listed as the project's lead innovator. Emily accepted the award. She thanked her design team. She thanked our parents. She thanked the construction crew. She never mentioned me. Not once. I only learned afterward because another engineer quietly asked, "Weren't those your drawings?" I remembered driving home alone that night, pulling over twice because I couldn't stop crying. Not because I lost the award, because my own family applauded while someone else accepted my work. Mom cleared her throat. We apologized. No, you asked me not to report it. Dad lowered his eyes. He remembered every word. If this becomes public, the 40 families could lose their jobs. So I stayed silent. I convinced myself protecting everyone else mattered more than protecting myself. Emily looked irritated. You're bringing up ancient history. No, I'm explaining why you didn't know I was married. Her expression changed. You married him because of me? What? You hid him because you wanted revenge. I stared at her for several seconds. Then I quietly shook my head. No, I hid my marriage because it was the first happy thing in my adult life that belonged only to me. The room became silent again. Ethan never asked me to keep a secret. He actually encouraged me to tell you. So why didn't you? Mom asked softly. I looked at her. Because I kept waiting for one family dinner. where I didn't leave feeling smaller than when I arrived. Nobody answered. There was always another joke, another comparison, another reminder that Emily was exciting and I was useful. Useful daughters solve problems. Exciting daughters receive applause. Dad covered his face with one hand. I failed you. Mom immediately turned toward him. Richard? No. He looked up. His eyes were wet. She's right. The room froze. I kept telling myself keeping peace made me a good father. He swallowed. I wasn't keeping peace. I was asking one daughter to absorb whatever the other one did. Emily looked stunned. Dad? He turned toward her. When you mocked Claire tonight, I should have stopped you. When you took credit for her work years ago, I should have stopped you. When you signed her name, his voice finally broke. I should have never created a family where you believed you had the right. Emily looked genuinely shaken for the first time. I was trying to save the company. No, Dad replied quietly. You were trying to save yourself. Nobody spoke. Then unexpectedly, my mother's phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Her face immediately lost color. It's Daniel, our chief financial officer, she answered. Hello? Her confident expression disappeared within seconds. What? Silence. How many? Another silence. Dad slowly stood. What happened? Mom lowered the phone. The bank? Her voice barely worked. Just froze our operating credit. Emily's face turned white. They can't. They did. Dad frowned. Why? Mom looked toward the proposal lying on the table. They've been notified that the Mercer investment is officially terminated. No one moved. Then Daniel's voice could actually be heard shouting through the speaker. Elaine! Have you seen the email? What email? The city just suspended the Riverside redevelopment review, Emily whispered. No. Mom looked at the screen with trembling hands. A new email notification appeared. City Development Authority. Notice of Procurement Review. Dad closed his eyes. The investigation had officially begun. For several seconds, nobody moved. Christmas dinner had become irrelevant. Half-empty wine glasses, untouched dessert, and wrapping paper scattered around the living room suddenly looked absurd. Against the weight of what had just happened, Dad reached for the laptop sitting on the sideboard. His hands shook as he opened the email. The subject line was impossible to misunderstand. Official Notice of Procurement Review. He silently read the first paragraph. Then the second. Finally, he looked at Emily. They've frozen the entire evaluation process. Emily grabbed the computer. They can't do that over one signature. Dad didn't answer. He simply turned the screen toward her. The notice listed several concerns. Unauthorized professional credentials. Disputed technical documentation. Possible misrepresentation of consulting staff. Compliance review requested before any further negotiations. None of it mentioned Ethan. None of it mentioned me. Everything was based on documents, exactly as Ethan had promised. Emily's confidence began to crack. They're overreacting. No, I said quietly. They're following the law. Mom suddenly turned toward me. Claire? Her voice softened instantly. We need your help. There it was. Not an apology. Not regret. The request. I almost expected it. If you call Ethan, I'm not calling Ethan. He'll listen to you. He already listened. You know what I mean? Yes, I answered. I know exactly what you mean. She stepped closer. You can explain this. There is nothing left to explain. We're family. I looked at her for a long moment. You only remember that when you need something. Her expression hardened. That's unfair. Is it? I pointed toward Emily. 20 minutes ago, my marriage was a joke. Now it's your emergency exit. Nobody argued. Because nobody could. Dad slowly closed the laptop. Elaine, he spoke more quietly than I had ever heard him. Did you know? Mom looked away. Know what? That Emily signed Claire's name. Silence. He asked again. Did you know? She didn't answer immediately. That was answer enough. Dad stared at her in disbelief. You knew it was temporary. You knew. We thought Claire would eventually agree. You forged legal documents. We were trying to keep the company alive. No. Dad's voice suddenly became firm. You kept lying because the first lie worked. Emily stood abruptly. So that's it? She looked directly at me. You've won. I blinked. Won? You finally got everyone on your side. I couldn't believe she still saw this as a competition. I didn't come here to beat you. You destroyed everything. No. I shook my head. I stopped protecting what you kept damaging. She laughed bitterly. Easy for you. You have the successful husband. The perfect career. You get to walk away. I took a slow breath. Do you really think that's why we're here? She didn't answer. You think I married Ethan because he's successful? No. I married him because he's the first person who never made me earn basic respect. The room became completely silent. When I said no, I continued. He accepted it. When I succeeded, he celebrated it. When I failed, he didn't make it into entertainment. I looked at Emily. I didn't hide my marriage because I was ashamed. I hid it because I finally had something beautiful that I knew you'd eventually try to use. Emily looked as though I'd slapped her. I would have never... You already did. I nodded toward the proposal. This wasn't about paperwork. This was about ownership. You believed everything connected to me eventually belonged to the family. Dad slowly sank into his chair. His face looked 10 years older than it had an hour earlier. I should have seen it. Mom looked at him. Richard? No, he interrupted quietly. I kept asking Claire to forgive. I never asked why she kept needing to. That sentence hung in the room. Nobody challenged it, because it was true. For years, whenever something happened, the solution had always been the same. Claire would understand. Claire would help. Claire would forgive. Nobody ever asked Emily to change. My phone vibrated again. A text from Ethan. No pressure, just checking if you're okay. I'm outside whenever you're ready. I smiled despite everything. Dad noticed. He's here? He wanted to make sure I didn't drive home upset. Mom looked genuinely surprised. He came? He never intended to come inside. Why not? I met her eyes. Because he respects boundaries. Another painful silence. Outside the front window, I could see Ethan's truck parked across the street beneath the Christmas lights. He hadn't rushed in to rescue me. He trusted me to handle my own family. He was simply there if I needed him. That simple difference nearly made me cry. Emily suddenly spoke again. So what happens now? I answered honestly. I don't know. The investigation will continue. The city will review everything. The bank will make its own decisions. And Ethan? He won't interfere. She frowned. Why? Because he believes rules should apply equally, even when they hurt people he cared about. Especially then. Mom suddenly reached for my hand. Claire? Her eyes filled with tears. Please, don't let this destroy us. I looked down at her hand, then gently moved mine away. This didn't start tonight. It only became impossible to hide tonight. I picked up my coat. Dad stood. I'll walk you out. Neither Mom nor Emily tried to stop us. We stepped into the cold December air. Snow had started falling. For several moments we stood on the porch without speaking. Finally, Dad said, I don't expect forgiveness. I looked at him. I know, but I owe you the truth. He reached into his briefcase and removed a thick manila envelope. I found this yesterday. He handed it to me. Inside were copies of internal emails, board meeting notes, financial summaries, and one page that made my stomach tighten. Across the top, someone had written, Contingency plan if Brooks' partnership is approved. Halfway down the page, I saw my name, then one sentence. Claire will most likely cooperate once Ethan is financially committed. I stared at it. They hadn't just assumed I'd help. They had planned for it, without ever asking me. Dad closed his eyes. I didn't know that page existed. I believe you. I should have known. He swallowed hard. I'm sorry. For the first time that night, his apology asked for nothing in return. No excuses, no requests, no conditions. Just the truth. Across the street, Ethan stepped out of his truck after seeing us on the porch. He didn't come closer. He simply waited, giving me the choice. Dad noticed him, then quietly said, I understand now, on why you trusted him before you trusted us. I looked at Ethan standing beneath the falling snow, then back at my father. So do I. Ethan opened the passenger door before I reached the truck. He didn't ask what had happened. He simply wrapped his arms around me. For the first time that evening, I let myself cry, not because the company was collapsing, not because my sister had forged my signature, but because I finally understood how Exhausting it had been to spend my entire life earning respect. That should never have depended on performance. After several minutes, Ethan quietly asked, "Do you want to tell me?" I handed him the manila envelope. He read every page without interrupting. When he reached the contingency plan, he sighed. "They expected to use you. They expected to use us." He nodded. "There's a difference." I looked at him. "They never believed your marriage belonged to you. They believed it became another family asset." I leaned back against the seat. I almost felt guilty tonight. For what? For not fixing everything. He smiled gently. "Claire, you didn't break it." The first week of January was unlike anything Dawson Development had experienced. The city formally opened its procurement review. The bank refused to extend the company's operating credit. Several subcontractors demanded immediate payment after learning the Riverside project had been suspended. None of those decisions came from Ethan. None came from me. They came from facts, exactly as they should have. A week later, my mother called. Then again. I ignored every call. Finally, she left a voicemail. "Please, just let us explain." 2 days later, she appeared outside my office. She carried a leather binder nearly 3 inches thick. Across the front, someone had printed, "Family Recovery Proposal." I invited her into the conference room. She immediately opened the binder. "We've developed a solution." I said nothing. She slid the first page toward me. "If Ethan purchases 40% of Dawson Development..." I stopped reading. She continued talking. "The bank will reconsider. The city will see stability. Emily can remain creative director. You can supervise compliance. Everyone wins." I slowly closed the binder. "No." Mom looked stunned. "You didn't even finish reading." "I didn't need to. You always wanted accountability." "I do. This gives you accountability." "No. This gives Emily protection." She leaned forward. "Claire, 42 employees depend on us." "I know. And Grandpa built this company." "I know. So how can you let it disappear?" I looked directly into her eyes. "I'm not letting it disappear. I'm refusing to save it the same way you've always asked me to." She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means protecting employees doesn't require protecting the people who created the problem." She stared at me. I opened my own folder. "I've spoken with an independent restructuring attorney." Her expression immediately changed. "You what?" "There is another option." I turned the document around. "If Dawson Development enters court-supervised restructuring, why its restoration division can be sold separately. The workers keep their jobs. The equipment stays together. Ongoing projects continue. The debts are handled legally." She skimmed the proposal, then looked up. "Emily would have to resign." "Yes." "And your father?" "He can stay as a technical advisor if the new owners want him." "And us?" I answered quietly. "You'd finally be responsible for your own decisions." She pushed the papers away. "This is punishment." "No. Punishment would be using Ethan's influence to destroy your company." "I'm refusing to use it to protect you." 3 days later, Dad asked to meet me alone. We met at a small diner we'd visited when I was a child. For several minutes, he simply stirred his coffee. Then he placed a single envelope on the table. Inside was a notarized declaration. It stated that I had never owned shares in Dawson Development, never guaranteed its debts, never authorized anyone to represent me. At the bottom was Dad's signature. "I should have done this years ago," he said. I folded the paper carefully. "Thank you." He nodded. "I'm also resigning as president." I looked up. "What?" "I can't keep pretending nothing happened." He smiled sadly. I finally realized something. "What?" "Keeping peace isn't the same as telling the truth." It was the most honest sentence I had ever heard him say. The investigation lasted almost 3 months. When it ended, the findings were clear. Emily had personally approved the submission containing my forged authorization. She had instructed a junior coordinator to remove my copyright notices before the proposal was assembled. The employee kept every email, every instruction, every revision. Because of those records, nobody needed my opinion. The evidence spoke for itself. Emily was prohibited from serving as project director on publicly funded redevelopment contracts for 3 years. She wasn't arrested. She wasn't ruined. But for the first time in her professional life, her reputation depended entirely on her own work. Not mine. Dawson Development entered restructuring that spring. A regional preservation cooperative purchased the restoration division. 38 employees kept their jobs. Dad accepted a consulting role, without executive authority, without the Dawson name opening doors. He earned respect the old-fashioned way, by doing excellent work. The showroom was sold. The company my grandfather built officially disappeared. Its people survived. And somehow, that mattered more. Late that summer, I received a letter. Not from my mother, from Emily. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was only 3 pages long. Near the end, she wrote, "I spent years convincing myself that making you look smaller made me look bigger. It never worked. It only made me smaller than I was willing to admit." For the first time, she didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't ask to meet. She didn't ask me to fix anything. She simply apologized. Months later, I agreed to see her once. In a therapist's office. Neutral ground. She looked different. Quieter. Less certain. "I need to ask you something," she said. "What? Did you hide your marriage because you hated me?" I shook my head. "No." "Then why?" I smiled sadly. "Because I finally loved my life enough to protect it." She lowered her eyes. "I deserve that answer." "No." "You needed it." 1 year after that Christmas, Ethan and I invited 12 people to the same historic library where we'd married. The stained glass windows looked exactly the same. The old wooden shelves still smelled of cedar and paper. My closest friends came. Dad came. Later that evening, Mom quietly asked whether she could join us for dessert. I said yes. Emily wasn't there. We weren't ready for holidays together. Healing isn't measured by calendars. It's measured by consistency. Dad spent 20 minutes explaining the building's original steel trusses to Ethan. Mom actually asked me about my work. Not politely. Not because she needed something. Because she genuinely wanted to understand. For the first time in my life, she listened longer than she spoke. As we prepared to leave, Dad noticed something. "You're wearing your ring." I looked down. For nearly 2 years, I'd worn it on a chain beneath my shirt. That night, it rested openly on my hand. I smiled. "I don't feel like hiding anymore." Ethan quietly took my hand beneath the table. Not to rescue me, not to answer for me, just to remind me that real love never asks you to become smaller so someone else can feel bigger. People often ask whether revealing my marriage was revenge. It wasn't. Revenge would have meant using Ethan's influence to destroy my family. Instead, I simply stopped protecting them from the consequences of choices they made without me. There's an important difference. For years, I believed peace meant avoiding conflict. Now I know peace built on one person's silence is only comfort for everyone else. Love does not require unlimited access. Family does not erase boundaries. And a joke repeated at one person's expense eventually stops being a joke. It becomes permission. That Christmas, I didn't change my family with one sentence. I changed my own life by finally refusing to laugh along. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't getting even. It's quietly building a life that no one else gets to define, borrow, or use without your permission.